Hey folks, I am just headed to CrossFit here. I'm going to talk about... Zoomed in on my head too much? What's going on? No, that's too much. That... I don't know. Something's going on there. That's weird. We'll figure it out later. I'm going to talk about some AI software development from over the weekend and direction I've been trying to push some stuff in to see if it helps a little bit. And I think I have enough content specifically for this type of thing from over the weekend that I'll make some YouTube videos on DevLeader, which is my main YouTube channel, and actually walk through code to explain some of this. So this will be, it's going to sound more specific for .NET developers, but there's probably, depending on the language you're using and the infrastructure, there's probably some very similar things that you can explore. But basically I'm getting a little fed up with the only feedback from people when, you know, seemingly LLMs and agents are doing a bit of hallucinating or building crap code, that it's like it's purely just a skill issue, right? It's like and it's always the same people that apparently have been building AI systems for 20 years, and they're an expert. They haven't had to manually type a line of code ever because their agent army just does everything perfectly. So skill issue for you. But I think what I'm finding kind of frustrating is like same set of guardrails in place. Like if you're using Copilot, your Copilot instructions, you can prompt in seemingly the same way. Like, I'm not saying that my prompts cannot be improved. I'm sure they can be, but I don't think this is the only thing going on. But you can go from having something where you're working with an agent and it produces some code and you're like, heck yeah, like that's pretty sweet that it did that. And then essentially things degrading. Like the example that I was kind of thinking through from the weekend was, working with Copilot and all of a sudden it just starts like deleting code, or working with Copilot like as we're iterating on a file and all of a sudden it just stops remembering how to do any formatting. So there's no this is going to be this time of year where this thing does not stop beeping and I lose my mind. So you'd have, it's making the edits, but all of a sudden there's no spacing between the lines and there's no indentation out of nowhere. So, like, pardon me, but what did I change about my prompt in mid-conversation that has an agent going, you know what, screw it, we don't need any formatting. So there's stuff that happens like this that's pretty stupid. Like, I find, given that I use it a lot, like, it happens often enough where I'm like, this is frustrating. And so yes, we can improve our prompts. More recently, like especially because I do a lot of work through like GitHub Copilot, where the agents are running in the cloud. And I think you can do this with VS Code, but like using custom agents, I don't think you can. I'm kind of frustrated with Microsoft. Yes, I work there and it's frustrating for me, but like I use Visual Studio Enterprise, the one that costs money, and the feature set is lagging behind Visual Studio Code like crazy. So like we can't do, unless I'm just stupid. I have Visual Studio Enterprise like insiders, so it's like the latest features, unless maybe mine's just not showing an update, but you can't use custom agents. Like, why? But so I use this in GitHub Copilot online. So having a custom agent alongside my Copilot instructions. Oh my God. I'll lose my sanity. And then trying to prompt better. And I'm hoping that like this is giving it more and more guardrails to do less and less dumb stuff. Another example that comes to mind that's it's probably feels a little bit better than just silly formatting stuff is like tests. So in Brand Ghost, I have established a pattern where effectively any class that I am testing, and this is not for you to decide whether it's good or bad or right or wrong. This is just a pattern that I have in the code base, okay? Pattern that I have in the code base is that when you are testing things, we resolve the system under test from our dependency container. The reason I'm doing this is because I am trying to shift as much as possible away from unit tests that are just like mocked services. Not that I have like a hatred for that. Like, I actually love to write code that is unit testable this way. But every test file, your system under test gets resolved from the dependency container. And my logic here is that as things evolve over time, more or less constructor parameters, this kind of stuff, we're just touching mocks less. Like, I want you to, and constructors and test setup, I want to minimize this effort so that you're using as many real things as possible, because we can. Everything's hooked up to use a database when it's running. It works perfectly fine. And the only things I really want to mock are like making external calls to services that I don't own. Or like at third-party library boundaries, right? Like things that I don't have control over, like I'm not testing that. So what does Copilot do? Despite my documentation in the repository saying one thing, my prompt saying to follow patterns of functional tests that are in the code base, my agent having the same instructions, like it will go write tests and then not do that. Okay, so yes, I guess my prompt, like anytime I'm telling an agent to go write code, my prompt must literally have an example of how to do it, because the documentation exists. The prompts will suggest reading documentation, following existing patterns, but it just doesn't. So I think, part of me is like, okay, well, with this type of thing, anytime I go tell an agent to do work, you're telling me that I personally, as the prompter, have to go tell it, here's every single possible pattern that I want you to consider. Like, I get it. It probably does help. But do you see how ridiculous that sounds? Right? Like, you're telling me any coding pattern that exists in my code base, if I wanted to get it right, I have to go have a snippet of that code passed into the prompt. Like, it's not scalable. It's ridiculous. And so I get that if I'm having, a back and forth with an agent, at that point, I do have to go tell it, here's an example, like follow this, because clearly you're not. And I'm sure it'll get back on track. This is how I've been correcting it, but it's frustrating because I will kick off a bunch of work to say get done overnight, and then I wake up and review the code, and it's always things like this, right? It's like, sure, there's some things where I'm letting the agent go kind of explore, and I'm not expecting it to get it right, but there's some stuff, like an example today, I asked it to go add some telemetry, and the actual code change is perfectly fine. It's great. But the tests are not. So, and this is like a recurring thing. So now, like I can't have that code landed and running. It's going to delay it even more time. So I would really just like to be able to get it to do that part right, because it's a simple thing. I know with one message to the LLM, I would say, that's not how we test. Here's an example of how we test, and it will do it. But why couldn't it do it in the beginning, despite all of these attempts to say, like, go code this way? So where I'm heading with all of this is that I am starting to add analyzers to the code. And if you're not familiar with like .NET, we have Roslyn, and we can write like custom analysis rules that do essentially like static analysis for us. And you can write some pretty complicated stuff to go enforce rules, which is really, really, really neat. And I've known about these for ages, but I have never done it. And I've talked about this like on Twitter and stuff too, and different comment threads and stuff like that. But there's source generation and analyzers, and those are two things in .NET that I've just spent like zero time on, unfortunately. It's one of those things where like I'm like, that sounds really cool, seems helpful, but I got other shit to do, and it's never really come up where I'm like, oh, I like depend on this. But that time was this weekend, and I said, this kind of thing is happening too often, where there's patterns in the code base that are just completely being missed, despite them being literally everywhere. And it's time to do something about it. So with analyzers, we can go write essentially custom rules so that when your code is going to compile, it can evaluate if your code is following the rules that you set. And you can have like different levels of diagnostics. So you can have it like as an info or like a warning or an error, this kind of thing. And so I started putting a bunch of these in. And the way that I approached this was on GitHub, they have GitHub Spaces. And because Brand Ghost is a multi-repository offering, like our front end and back end are in different repositories, for example. Same with like our blog is in a different repository. We can, in GitHub Copilot Spaces, we can add in sort of like different repositories as sources of information. Then when I chat with the LLM, like it's kind of like chatting with ChatGPT, but it has full context to my code base because it can literally use the repositories that I've linked up. So I had a conversation with it the other night and basically said, like, I want to start putting analyzers into the repository, specifically for the back-end code, because that's in C#. And I said, what I'd like you to do is to look at the Copilot instructions, look at the custom agent file. I would like you to look in the documentation folder, and then also analyze the code. And this is such a generic thing to say, analyze the code. But analyze the code and basically look for common patterns that are reused across the code base. Give me a bulleted list of all of the things that you think having analyzers in place would help with to enforce these patterns. And then I tried to be kind of specific, like don't go try and write the analyzer code like in this chat. Just give me the list and like your reasoning, your logic for why you feel this is an impactful area to have an analyzer over. And it spat out like 20 things. By the way, I've repeated this exercise and it's given me like even like 30 things after giving me the initial set where I implemented a bunch. So it's pretty interesting. Like it goes pretty deep. And so it did a really, really, really good job. Even though that prompt, like arguably someone who listened to what I said is like, that's probably a terrible way to do it. Like you're gonna get results from all over the place. Like what does this even mean? I don't know, like I'm just experimenting with it, but it did a good job and called out a lot of areas where I'm like, literally I've seen pull requests where I'm like fighting with Copilot, like, dude, just look at the file beside this one and like you completely made up new patterns. Don't do that. So I think it was like 8 to 10 analyzers. Like I was doing this in bed on Saturday night. And I sat there for like half an hour in bed and I was just like on my phone filing GitHub issues. And would have been way more effective at a computer, but I was already in bed and I was too excited to go to sleep until I did this. And I fired off like 8 to 10 of these things and had to go write custom analyzers for me overnight. Now, they weren't perfect, and this is one of those things where I wasn't expecting it to be, right? I've never even written an analyzer. I don't feel like I'm in a good situation or a good seat to tell Copilot how to do it right and how to do it wrong if I've never done it before. So it made like 8 to 10 of these pull requests, and I checked them out one by one. and I looked at what it was trying to do. By the way, I need to go actually better understand how the analyzers work and get set up and stuff. But now I have a bunch of examples to play with. But I tried it out, right? Like if you change some of the code that the analyzer is supposed to catch, try to build, it should catch it, right? It should underline it in Visual Studio and say like, no, that's not right. Here's why. And so I played around and, just did some iteration back and forth across. I think I missed all but one so far. I'm in progress on it because it's way more complicated. But yeah, it was really cool. It was like, hey, here's a scenario that you're missing. Or I would, pull down the pull request code, like that branch, and it's like none of the code is compiling. And I'm like, well, hold on, like this is actually a totally valid code snippet. And the analyzer is missing that scenario, or it's including it when it shouldn't. So kind of both ways. Some things were missed and some things were aggressively included. And just iterated with it. And I said, like, here's an example to include or exclude, write the test. And we went back and forth. And I think now that I have a bunch of examples, like I could probably go do some of that myself. But it's an interesting crossroads because I'm like, this is such a neat thing where it's like, I have a bunch of analyzers in my code now. I think we're up to, 24 in total, custom ones. I didn't write any code for them. I don't actually know in practice how it works. I understand conceptually, but in practice, I didn't do it. I want to go learn. I'm actually genuinely curious about analyzers and source generators, like genuinely. But at this point, there's like 24 of them, and I don't know how they work. Pretty neat. But the idea behind all of this is now that I have these analyzers in place, I'm hoping to see, I'm hoping it's dramatic improvements to following standards. And the reason for that is that the code literally will not compile unless you do it the way that I say. And I think I asked Copilot last night, kind of the same thing, laying in bed. Now that I've added all these analyzers, re-perform your analysis. What are the gaps? And I didn't really make it that far. I just asked it to do that, but then it was I got CrossFit super early in the morning. I'm not staying up to do that. But that's a when I get home thing. And we'll put it to the test, right? I don't know. Maybe I prioritized all the wrong things. I don't know. But whole point of this was guardrails. And I'm hoping that having more programmatic guardrails in place will make it so that working with agents is a little bit less frustrating on some of the stuff I feel like it should just get right because there's a million patterns. It's almost like it feels like it has to go out of its way to go introduce some of these patterns versus just take the easy route, which is look beside you. But I assume it's because it's trained on so much data, right? That whatever I have is not the common thing. So pretty interesting stuff. But like I said, I'm going to make some YouTube videos on that on my main channel, which is Dev Leader. And I'll walk you through some of those things, and then when I'm ready and I've learned about how analyzers work and I feel like I can talk through them, I'll make some videos on that. So yeah, that's all. If you have questions you want answered, leave them below in the comments. Otherwise, codecommute.com, submit anonymously. Anonymous cinnamon. Bye.